It's coming home, it's coming home, it's coming. Football's coming home. We'll get the World Cup. We'll win the World Cup. We got it. Football's coming home. Tears are just for finals day. The finals, there was no way. England screwed up and failed, but they won in '66. It was great. The referees helped us out, and Jeff Hurst goal went in. 3 lines on my shirt. Jewels remains gleaming. Now's the time to strike. We got to the Euro finals. Well, alongside the great song by the Lightning Seeds, Three Lions, which was the theme for the 96 and 96 Euro 98 World Cup for England. I could say without hyperbole that the great country that invented soccer, or football as it is the team, and it's basically the team I cheer for. Yeah, you could say, why aren't you cheering for Canada? Well, Canada and soccer don't really go hand in hand well. But I cheer for another country kind of too. But it is what it is. But today I'll tell you about the pains of being an English fan and why pain seems to be my middle name. England, such a joy to be around. You know, as a giant of an England fan as I am, England has brought me a lot of pain and suffering too. I know what you're looking at. It's like, this isn't an official England shirt. What the frig are you wearing? Well, screw you. I mean, as a guy who can't afford a $200 soccer shirt, especially with World Cup coming along, things happened. I did win a Rooney shirt in a 2014 thing at my local bar, but the simple fact was that, that got messy. So that's why I wore this stuff. And of course, my good buddy Bill Lang got me the England gear and all that. So anyway, today's video is all about the pain of being an English soccer fan and how England, even though they've won one World Cup in 1966, people said, well, what have you done for me lately? I will be talking about England's pain and misery and not getting the World Cup and all that. Do note, of course, that, there are other countries that don't even have a World Cup victory and, they suffer through pain and suffering. But the simple fact is that somehow England's pain always seems to have my personal pain and all that. I mean, as a big Toronto Maple Leafs fan, as I am, I'm used to pain and not making it far, even as a Blue Jay fan that way. But anyway, I will be talking about England at the World Cup and why it's painful. Well, England is the home of soccer/football. Like, they were the guys who really had the big soccer tournaments, and in 1871 made the FA Cup their own, becoming the most prestigious knockout tournament in world soccer. Still to this day, 150 years later, it's like, holy crow. But England at the World Cup, it changes. Now the first part of pain for England fans was that the first 3 World Cups happened without English or even British participation. England turned their noses up at it, saying that we're the best in the world. Why do we have to prove ourselves? So the first 3 World Cups happened without England's intervention. But by 1950, after the war, England realized we should get in the World Cup. So they did. They took care of Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland and won the home championship, which made it a trip to the 1950 tournament. They were the favorites to reach the Final Four from Group 2, which had Spain, Chile, and the United States in it. England took on Chile and easily beat them 2-0 thanks to Stan Morrison and Wilf Mannion. But the pain would be huge 4 days later as they would face the Americans in Battle of Horizonte. As Joe Gacian scored a header. I kind of reached into it in my previous video, but anyhow, Joe Gacian scored. It was 1-0. English newspapers would misprint the score as 10-1, but it was actually untrue. But yeah, it was so bad for the Americans. Only one journalist actually made a mention of that game. England needed to beat Spain and have Chile beat the United States. Unfortunately, Chile did win. That was the good news. The bad news for England was that Spain won 1-0. England was eliminated. And the so-called greatest nation in soccer history would be booted. So, in 1954, they qualified for the World Cup. They're drawn with Switzerland, Italy, and Belgium. Now, I talked about this in the format video, but as they had two seeded teams and two unseeded teams, England and Italy didn't have to face each other. So they only played 2 games. So England only had to play Switzerland and Belgium. England would face Switzerland in the first. No, England would face Belgium in the first game of Switzerland 1954. And actually, we're down 1-0. And it was a huge game. So the score was 4-4, a 4-4 tie. So Belgium held England to a tie, which was terrible and painful. England would take on Switzerland, the host. And they actually won 2-0. England progressed as the group winners, and with Switzerland faced Italy in a playoff and beat them. So England and Switzerland qualified for the final 8. England would take on Uruguay in the quarterfinals, the team that never lost a World Cup game ever. Unfortunately, though, for England, the pain was huge as Uruguay won 4-2. Fortunately, though, Uruguay would lose in the semifinals, their first ever World Cup loss. But yeah, England can't believe they're not. So qualifying for the 1958 World Cup would be huge and all that. And England could not face the home nations to qualify for the World Cup. They had to face some other people. So they would draw with Ireland and Denmark. England was 3-0-1. Unfortunately, England had a big loss, a painful loss, as 4 key members of the English squad who qualified for Sweden in 1958, Roger Byrne, Duncan Edwards, David Pegg, and Don Taylor, all died in the Munich air disaster, which wiped out Manchester United. Fortunately, though, Bobby Charlton and Matt Busby, among others, survived. So England were drawn with the Soviets, Brazilians, and Austrians. Unfortunately, England would tie all 3 games, including the first 0-0 tie in World Cup history with Brazil. Well, you held Pele in check, but you couldn't beat friggin' Austria? Like, there would be a playoff. England would face the Soviets in a 1-game playoff to decide who gets to the quarterfinals. The Soviets win 1-0. England were pissed off at themselves. Of course, you lose to the Soviets in anything, that's huge. So, 1962, England qualified from their group of Portugal and Luxembourg. Luxembourg famously beat Portugal in the qualification, but not England. England were drawn with Hungary, Argentina, and Bulgaria at Chile 62. England took care of Argentina 3-1, next to Bobby Charlton, Jimmy Greaves, and Ron Flowers scoring goals. So England looked pretty good. They tied Bulgaria, but they lost to Hungary. Fortunately, though, England took second in the group and would move on to the quarterfinals. But here comes Brazil, the team that they held 0-0 in 58, were a different team in 62. As Garrincha put up a pair of goals, Brazil beat England 3-1, and England was out. Sir Walter Winterbottom, who was the England coach for many years, left. And it would be Alf Ramsey who became manager of England. Fortunately, because England had hosted the World Cup in 1966, they didn't have to qualify. So they drew all their matches. Well, England played all their games at Wembley Stadium in London, which meant that, they didn't have to play in any other stadium. But that was the last time a host nation would have that advantage, just playing one stadium. England tied Uruguay 0-0 and beat France and Mexico by 2-0 scores, so they didn't give up a goal. They got to the quarterfinals against Argentina. Unfortunately, that game is controversial because of the German referee sending Antonio Ratan of Argentina off for violence of the tongue, as they call it. Jeff Hurst scored to make it 1-0. So England would get to the semis against Portugal. Bobby Charlton was the hero and all that. And a 2-1 win, scoring both goals. Portugal did score in the 82nd minute, breaking Gordon Banks' scoreless streak. England got to the final against West Germany. Jeff Hurst scored that goal that did not cross the line. It did not cross the line. There was no way it crossed the line. Although they said that if it wasn't in, then Roger Hunt was going to be there as a consummate professional and tap it in. So that was just crushing and all that. Anyway, Hurst would put up the hat trick. So England were the defending champs headed to Mexico in 1970. And because they won the World Cup, they got to qualify for the World Cup easily. They were drawn with Romania, Brazil, and the Czechs in the group. England took care of Romania and Czechoslovakia 1-0. We were losing to Brazil 1-0 on a goal by Jarzinho. Although Gordon Banks did make a famous save off Pele. England were drawn against Germany in the quarterfinals. The only problem for England was that Gordon Banks could not play in net. He was ill, so Peter Bonetti played. And even though that happened, England did take a 2-0 lead on goals by Alan Mullery and Martin Peters. So England had a chance and all that. Unfortunately, Bonetti made a few clangers and Germany scored. Ramsey would substitute Bobby Charlton and Martin Peters, trying to save up their energy for the semifinals. Well, that's one problem. As Uwe Seeler tied the game and Gerd Muller scored in the 89th minute in extra time. Charlton would not play for England again, and that is painful. You're up 2-0 on Germany, and yet you couldn't finish the job and get to the semifinals. I don't know how they would have done against Italy, but yeah, Germany, that game sucked. I think if Gordon Banks was in net, England probably might have won. All because of Mexican stomach flu. Fuck. 1974, they didn't qualify. They were drawn with Poland and Wales and looked pretty good. England, unfortunately, after losing 2-0 in Poland, had to beat Poland at Wembley to qualify for the World Cup. Poland just needed a tie. And somehow, Poland got the ball to Jan Domarski, who in the 57th minute 1-0. England did tie on an Alan Clark penalty, but unfortunately, Jan Tomaszewski, with all those big saves and all that. Like, there were so many great chances for England to win the game, or even score on Tomaszewski, but can't believe it. Poland would actually end up in third place at World Cup 74, which was amazing. England can't believe it. Alf Ramsey resigned from his post. So anyway, that made Bobby Robson become England manager. England failed again in 78 to make the World Cup. They were drawn thanks to Italy, who could score goals and England didn't, and all that. So England had the pain of missing 2 World Cups in a row. And also the pain that their rival Scotland got to the World Cups. Those World Cups. Thankfully, in 82, England got their act together. They took second in their group behind Hungary. Man, Hungary was coming back in it. England would take care of France, the Czechs, and Kuwait, winning all 3 games. They took the French down 3-1 by Brian Robson 2-goal performance. They beat the Czechs 2-0 and Kuwait 1-0. Surprised that Kuwait got into the World Cup. I forgot about that. Trevor Francis was the hero of that one. So England was undefeated, 3-0. Yeah, they would. But the next round would be a second group stage containing 3 teams, which was shocking. It was like, no knockout games? Fuck. England would be in a group with Spain and West Germany. Unfortunately, West Germany held England in check 0-0. And after West Germany won their game 2-1, England knew they had to beat Spain by 2 to progress. a one-goal win wouldn't mean anything. Unfortunately, the host Spaniards held England in check. No score. England failed. England did not get to the semifinals. That was West Germany, who subsequently got to the final, lost to Italy. Spain did their job as spoilers. England can't believe their luck. They play 6 games of the World Cup. They don't lose a game, and yet they're not in the semifinals. Blasphemy! Blasphemy! So it was time for 86. They qualified thanks to their job. They won their group, with Northern Ireland also qualifying too. England would lose shockingly to Portugal 1-0 in 86. If it was 66, it'd be different, but 86, wow. They tied Morocco 0-0. It's like painful. You couldn't beat Morocco? Hopefully Canada beats Morocco in 2022. The final group game had England face Poland, and they were in deep shit. But thanks to Gary Lineker scoring a hat trick, all 3 goals, England beat Poland 3-0 and pulled themselves to the round of 16. England beat Paraguay 3-0 in the round of 16, so that worked out. But then they had to face Argentina in the middle of a rivalry that happened on the pitch, 1966, and off the pitch, the Falkland Islands. Needless to say, we all know about that game, and Diego Maradona scoring 2 goals. One very, very controversial as he punched the ball over Peter Shilton's head and made it 1-0. It was obvious he did that because Peter Shilton's 6'1" and Maradona was 5'6". The hand of God. But Maradona did score a famous goal weaving through England's defense, and that was called the greatest World Cup goal in history. That was clean, obviously. Gary Lineker made it 2-1, but then Lineker had a chance at a header to tie the game, but he failed miserably. People thought Gary Lineker couldn't head the ball because he was afraid of brain damage. Despite all that, Gary Lineker scored 6 goals and led the World Cup in goal scoring, getting him the Golden Boot. England would qualify for World Cup 1990 by not giving up any goals in qualification. So anyway, it was pretty good. You know that. Unfortunately, England had a big problem in the 1980s. Hooliganism. And it cost England dearly, especially with the clubs, the major clubs. Hooliganism in 1985 was a huge thing. Liverpool fans beat up on Juventus fans before the 85 European Cup final, and that meant that English club teams like Man U, Liverpool, Arsenal, and Chelsea could not compete in European competitions for 5 years. But the national team thankfully didn't get any punishment. But still, hooliganism was huge. It was so bad that the Italian officials decided to force England to play on the islands of Sardinia and Sicily, far away from the mainland. So in Group F, England dealt with Ireland, Holland, and Egypt. They tied Ireland 1-1, and then they had painful 0-0 tie with the Dutch, although the Dutch took down England in Euro 88. England took care of Egypt 1-0. So in a boring group, they won with 4 points. Then England faced Belgium in the knockout stages. It was still 0-0. David Platt in the 119th minute scored to make it 1-0 in England after the quarters. England would then face Cameroon in the quarterfinals, and Cameroon was minutes away from shocking England and getting an African team to the semifinals. But based on the fact that no African team has ever made the semifinals in World Cup history, you could kind of guess that England came back to win, thanks to Gary Lineker falling over the box twice and scoring penalties. So, thankfully for England, they were in the semifinals. They would meet their old enemy, West Germany. It was a tough game. The worst part was that Paul Parker had a free kick deflect off of him, making it 1-0 for West Germany. Fortunately, though, England did tie the game. But unfortunately, in extra time, Paul Gascoigne made a terrible foul, which meant that he was yellow carded. But the worst part is because of his accumulation of yellow cards, he couldn't play in the final. So Gaza was crying, and then off to the right, you see Gary Lineker making gestures and all that. Lineker said that he needed Bobby Robson to watch for Gaza. Then went to penalties. And if you know, being an English fan, the pain of penalties, this started it. Peter Shilton could not save any penalties, despite the fact that he actually guessed correctly. The ball went in the net. Stuart Pearce and Chris Waddle both missed penalties, and, it was terrible. England was out of the competition. England could not win the third place playoff against Italy, despite the fact that, it's their best World Cup since '66. So England had some hope, some remnants of things. But by 1994, they were a shell of themselves. They were taken out easily by the Dutch. The worst part is England, in their final qualifying game, needed to crush San Marino by at least 7, and for Poland to beat the Dutch to qualify. England did win their match 7-1, but the Dutch did win the game anyhow, so the Poland couldn't win anyway, so it didn't matter. England shockingly lost out to Norway. Like, Norway in the World Cup? Oy. England fucked everything up, especially to Norway. And let's not forget 1981 when they were qualified for the 82 World Cup. That Norwegian commentator saying, "You boys took one hell of a beating." Anyway, Graham Taylor was kind of a bad manager for, mishandling Gary Lineker. So England could not qualify, and to date, this is the last time England has failed to make a World Cup, 94. In 98, though, they tied Italy in Rome to ensure their place, top of the group. So then they were Group G with Tunisia, Romania, and Colombia. They beat Tunisia 2-0 thanks to Alan Shearer and Paul Scholes. Their second match, they lost to Romania shockingly 2-1, as Romania did prove that their 94 performance was no fluke. England took care of Colombia thanks to David Beckham's free kick goal in front of the royal family. England would finish second in the group, which made sure they made it to the round of 16. Unfortunately, though, they would have to take care of Argentina. And that game was terrible. 1986 and 66 were terrible. 98 should be one hell of a controversial match. And it was, thanks to David Beckham's petulant kick at Diego Simeone. The replays show, he flicked his foot and made contact with Simeone. It's a red card, though, too. So, anyway, yes, Michael Owen made that famous solo run to make England look good. The game was 2-2 and almost ended for England in extra time on a Sol Campbell goal, but unfortunately, the goal was called back because of some pushing by the English players towards Argentine in the penalty area. So it's time for penalties. Oh no. England did beat Spain in penalties in Euro quarterfinals in 96, but in the semis they lost the penalties thanks to Germany. So you know what's going to happen. David Batty made a mistake, and England were knocked out of the World Cup on penalties. Fortunately, though, Argentina would be knocked out of the goal by Dennis Bergkamp in the quarterfinals. But still, England was pissed off. And Beckham was set death threats and all that. People blamed his petulance for why England lost. England had to qualify for the World Cup. They were in Group 9. They actually lost the last game in the original Wembley Stadium to Germany 1-0. Kevin Keegan resigned and Sven-Goran Eriksson came in. England were in deep trouble near the end of that campaign, 2002. But England shockingly went to Munich and beat the Germans 5-1, thanks to a hat-trick by one Michael Owen. England knew that they had to tie Greece and hope Germany screwed up against Finland. And Germany did. They couldn't beat Finland. That was shocking. But thanks to David Beckham's free kick goal, it went in the net over the Greek keeper. England qualified directly to the World Cup. It didn't have to go to the playoff. Although Germany did have to go to the playoff against Ukraine and qualify for the World Cup. England took care of Sweden in the first game of the group stage, a 1-1 tie. England then took care of Argentina thanks to Beckham scoring a penalty and getting revenge for his 98 misdeed. England could not beat Nigeria. It was 0-0 tie. England did go to the round of 16 against Denmark and crushed them 3-0 thanks to Owen, Ferdinand, and Heskey scoring. That meant they took on Brazil in the quarterfinals. And they did take the lead. Michael Owen was the hero. But unfortunately, that Ronaldinho free kick goal that David Seaman bungled meant that England were out of the quarterfinals. And England it's just painful. David Seaman made a mistake. So they went to Germany 2006 and qualified. They won 8 out of 10 and qualified, so they won. England would face Paraguay, Trinidad, and Sweden in the group stage. They beat Paraguay, thank goodness for that. England actually were held in check by the Trinidad and Tobago team, but then thanks to Peter Crouch's goal, England beat Trinidad. England tied Sweden 2-2. So in the round of 16, they would face Ecuador, and thanks to David Beckham's free kick, England won the game and would go to the quarters against our old rivals, Portugal. And in a game on Canada Day 2006, the day that things changed for me. England and Portugal were tied 0-0 when Wayne Rooney stupidly made a lunge at, I think it was, Helder Postica? I don't remember what happened. But Cristiano Ronaldo's actions led to Rooney being red carded and sent off. And then the stupid wink from Cristiano Ronaldo. Ay, ay, ay. Well, needless to say, it went to penalties, and yes, England lost on penalties. Kind of knew that was going to happen. England only had one penalty converted, and that was Owen Hargreaves, who wasn't even English. He was Canadian by birth. So I was so crushed and all that. And that started a 12-year grudge against the Portuguese soccer team, in which I would never speak happiness about the Portuguese soccer team. And I would hate their guts. And until England and Portugal both played in a tournament and England did better than Portugal, I would never be happy towards the Portuguese soccer team. Of course, it's about the soccer team. It's not about Portuguese people in general, because I know many Portuguese people. So thus I couldn't be that bitter or else lose my friendships. Yeah, it was shocking. Like, I was depressed and all that. It's not easy being a 21-year-old soccer fan at that time and just being depressed. The Portuguese thing was so bad that when Portugal beat France to win Euro 2016, I, I, I took a vow of silence for 12 hours, literally. Well, despite all that, they got to England now, got to the World Cup in South Africa, and would take care of Algeria, would face Algeria, US, and Slovenia. Their first game, England took a quick lead, 1-0. But unfortunately, Robert Green just had to make that giant boo-boo off of a Landon Donovan shot. It rolls in the net. Game tied. England only gets a point. They couldn't believe their luck. They were tied 0-0 with Algeria. I mean, it can't be Algeria. That's terrible. England were really in trouble. Fortunately, though, they did beat Slovenia 1-0. So it worked. Well, at least they qualified. The only problem was, because they were second, they had to face Germany in the round of 16. And Germany crushed it. Miro Klose scored, and then Germany was up 2-0 after 32 minutes. It was like, here we go. England's going to get their asses whooped. But Matthew Upson scored a header to make it 2-1, and Frank Lampard had a chance. Lampard! Yes! No! What? Lampard's shot clearly crossed the line. It was so far in. Neuer had no chance. Anyway, the German media said it was revenge for Wembley in 1966. Like, what revenge for that? 44 years later. It should have been 1990 because Germany beat England. But, FIFA refused to implement goal line technology. And of course, the leader of FIFA, Sepp Blatter, German. He didn't want goal line technology. Yeah, gee, we all know you're German. England couldn't do anything, and Germany won the game 4-1. It was so bad, I figured I actually didn't watch that game live. I actually turned off. I actually was not doing anything. I didn't watch TV on that time. I thought Germany's going to crush England to fine powder, and they did 4-1. Little did I know about Lampard's goal, or non-goal, that is. Anyway, England went to Brazil 2014 and qualified. Thank goodness for that. They went to face Italy, Uruguay, and Costa Rica. And unfortunately, England faltered to Italy and Uruguay, which meant that they were out of the World Cup even if they beat Costa Rica. Worst part was, England couldn't even beat Costa Rica, 0-0 tie, for the first time since 1958. When they qualified for the World Cup, England was out in the group stage. No knockout games. It was just so pissy. All that. So England couldn't do anything right. They only got 1 point. It was the dead rubber match. And it was painful. I mean, Italy and Uruguay should have been easily stopped, but no, they didn't. Who wasn't happy? And then 2018 comes in Russia. England qualified and would take on Tunisia, Panama, and Belgium. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I think Belgium would be tough. The other two should be easy wins. England thankfully won 2-1. As Harry Kane scored a key goal. So England won the game. Then they took on Panama and crushed them in divine powder 6-1. Harry Kane with a hat trick. So I'm like, yes, here we go. And now Belgium came. And people were saying that both teams were trying to tank so that they could take second place and have an easier draw in the round of 16. All that. Yep, media outlets said a loss is beneficial because the winner would be in the draw that had 4 of the top 7 sides in the world. That's what a lot of people say. Both teams basically had reserve teams. England's loss was kind of a game. Then they would face Colombia. Jaime Rodriguez's team. It was 1-0 for Harry Kane. He did it. Unfortunately, there's a header to take the game to extra time. It was like shocking. And then after extra time, no goals. It's like penalties. And like, here we go again. I remember watching in Human Attack with Bill. The game England-Colombia, and I'm like, here we go again. I can't watch. But somehow, in some way, England won the penalty shootout 4-3. And I was stunned. Stunned by soup. So England, they faced the quarterfinals against Sweden. Me and Bill had different things to do that Saturday, so I watched the game at home. England won 2-0, and I'm like, yes, I knew it. I knew they were going to be Sweden. So we got to the semifinals against Croatia, and back at Human Attack, me and Bill were watching the game. England couldn't believe the luck. And thanks to an extra time goal by Mandzukic, Croatia won 2-1, sparing England penalties, but giving England a loss. And I'm like, oh, fuck off. It didn't also help that England lost the third place game against Belgium. So, yeah, it's painful. It's painful for me as an England fan to see them falter in the World Cup and all that. Me pouring my heart and soul for England for many tournaments and to see it falter. You shouldn't see my face when England lost to Italy in the Euro final, which me and Bill saw live at Bobby O'Brien's in Kitchener. It was like, oh, the pain, the suffering. Ay, caramba. Well, it's painful. England's pain is normally my pain because, as a guy who seems to want to be in the sports field that cannot get into the sports field no matter how hard he tries, and is working at Canadian Tire in the warehouse. But, making YouTube videos and all that kind of is my therapy and all that. And, Pain is my middle name in a sense. Well, it's William Henry, but still. Being an English fan is painful. And hopefully 2022 we can take care of Wales, we can take care of the US, and we can take care of Iran and win the World Cup. It's possible. It's possible. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Diamond. I know.